Why is this train leaving Chicago Union Station backwards? Today's video is about 3 Amtrak trains. First, we have the City of New Orleans, an overnight service between Chicago and New Orleans. Within the state of Illinois, there are 2 additional trains that run as far south as Carbondale. These are the Illini and the Saluki. In this video, I will explain something strange about their departure from Chicago, and in the second half, we're going to ride the City of New Orleans until Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. We've come to the Roosevelt Road Viaduct, my favorite Chicago rail fanning spot, to watch Illini 393 depart Chicago Union Station. Well, that's really weird. This train was backing out. Did we make a mistake and catch something headed into the yard instead? Nope, this really was the Illini. When it comes to passenger trains, roughly speaking, there are 2 main categories. There are multiple units, which are basically passenger cars that can move on their own power. And these almost exclusively tend to be bidirectional. And then there are locomotive-hauled passenger trains. The cars on these cannot move on their own power. They need to be pushed or pulled by a locomotive. And there are a few different ways locomotive-hauled trains can change directions. You can simply move the locomotive from one side to the other, or turn the train around using a Y. But to do this, you need special tracks that take up a lot of space. That's why sometimes a train will just have a locomotive on both ends. Or they'll use what's known as a cab car. These do not have the power to move themselves, but they do feature a driving cab with the controls for the locomotive. When the cab car is used, the locomotive is pushing. Amtrak actually uses all these different methods throughout the country, but there is one common thread through all of it. At big terminal stations, the locomotive is always on the side opposite of where the passengers are boarding from. And this isn't just Amtrak policy, most commuter railroads do the same. But why? Well, the vast majority of American railroads are not electrified, so they use diesel locomotives. If you've ever stood next to a big diesel engine running, you'll know that it is not a pleasant experience. There's the insanely loud rumbling noise, the bad air quality that comes from, burning dead dinosaurs. Having the locomotives at the opposite end doesn't only prevent passenger discomfort, it also prevents those nasty gases from entering the main passenger halls. Trains in Chicago follow the same procedure, but as we just saw, the City of New Orleans, Illini, and Saluki break this rule. When you board these trains in Chicago, the locomotive is the first thing you'll see. And what that means is that when it's time to go, the train leaves with the locomotive pushing. There's no second locomotive, there's no cab car, so a conductor has to stand by the door of the front car, or is it the back car, and use their walkie-talkie to communicate to the engineer in the locomotive. Because of that extra layer of communication that's required, this can really only be done at slow speeds. Surely they're not going to drive like this all the way to Louisiana, are they? Don't worry, this whole backing up thing is very short. By the time the trains pass underneath the McCormick place in Chicago, the locomotive is at the front, pulling the train along as it should be. So there must be somewhere where the trains swap directions, somewhere between McCormick Place and Union Station. There is, and there's a good reason for doing this. It all has to do with the way the tracks are laid out in Chicago. The city of New Orleans was a renowned train run by the Illinois Central Railroad. The train was so famous that there was even a song written about it. My favorite rendition is the one sung by Arlo Guthrie.
Riding on the city of New Orleans.
In the old Illinois Central days, the city of New Orleans left from Central Station, a station in Chicago that no longer exists today. In the 1970s, Illinois Central abandoned all their passenger trains, and Amtrak took over the long-distance trains, while Metra took over the electric commuter service in Chicago. Today, the Metra Electric District still runs into Millennium Station. However, Amtrak wanted all their trains to leave from the same station in Chicago, and Union Station was chosen to be that terminal. This worked great for most routes, but the problem is that there is no direct connection between the old Illinois Central line, which by the way is now owned by Canadian National, and Union Station. There are connections to tracks leading away from Chicago, so these trains have to first back out onto a different track so they can then switch to the track they need to be on. On the return journey, something similar happens. The train arrives on a track facing away from Union Station before reversing and backing into the station. So which tracks do these trains take? Well, when looking at the Chicago rail map, I came up with two possible options. One would be to take the BNSF line to Halstead UIC and then taking the St. Charles Airline over the river and onto the Canadian National tracks. The other option is to take the Norfolk Southern line over the Pennsylvania Railroad Bridge until crossing the Canadian National Freeport Subdivision. There's a short connecting track, and the trains could then travel past Pingtown Memorial Park on their journey southbound. If you turn on the transit layer in Apple Maps, it seems to suggest that it takes option 1, so let's go to Halstead UIC Station on the Metro BNSF line and see for ourselves.
I've arrived at Halstead UIC Station on the Metro BNSF line. Those are the BNSF tracks. They're also used by Amtrak's Southwest Chief and California Zephyr. So like a lot of Metro stations, Halstead Street Station is a hole in a creepy tunnel. Very basic. 2 island platforms. Over there is a branch to the St. Charles Airline.
After waiting a while, it was safe to conclude that this is not where these trains turn. After investigating, it seems it would even be impossible for Amtrak to take this route. Not only has the bridge over the river been up for a very long time, a whole bunch of the tracks have been completely ripped up. These cars may be called superliners, they are certainly not amphibious. So it must be option 2. That's why on a warm July night, how I miss those, I made my way to Pingtown Memorial Park. Sure enough, a little after 8, I saw a familiar flash of silver backing it up onto the old bridge. So the mystery of the backwards driving has been solved, and we've even established the path it takes. Now I want to experience this from the train. Let's ride the city of New Orleans. But before we do, just a little bit about the future of this connection. Obviously, a backup like this is extremely time-consuming. Amtrak is planning to construct a ramp from the St. Charles Airline to Union Station, meaning they can get rid of the switch and the backup. While this is great news for the city of New Orleans, Illini, and Saluki, I think there are some other trains that will benefit from this as well. Currently, all the Amtrak Michigan trains, as well as the Lakeshore Limited and Capital Limited, take the Norfolk Southern Chicago line into the Windy City. Norfolk Southern gets a fat F as a host railroad. Amtrak trains are constantly delayed because freight trains are given priority. So Amtrak is playing around with the idea of rerouting these eastbound trains onto the South Shore line. This commuter line runs parallel to the current route, but is almost fully double-tracked and completely geared towards passenger rail. If this reroute happens, it could drastically improve speed and on-time performance of these Amtrak routes. They could also stop at Gary or Hammond, both being more centrally located than the current Hammond-Whiting station. Once the connection in Chicago is built, these trains could take the South Shore line, move on to the old Illinois Central line, and then glide into Union Station. Another set of trains that would benefit are the Lincoln Service and Texas Eagle. From Joliet to Chicago, they use Canadian National tracks that lead to frequent delays. With this new connection, they could be rerouted over the Metro-owned Rock Island District, maybe add a stop in Tinley Park, and take the new ramp into Chicago Union Station. Now that that's all out of the way, let's ride the city of New Orleans.
Alright, now it's time for the best part of the video. We are going to ride the city of New Orleans. Now, the city of New Orleans goes to, well, New Orleans. That's an overnight journey. I am not sleeping on this train. We are going to get on the train here at Chicago Union Station and ride until Champaign-Urbana, just about 2.5 hours away. I'm really excited about this, so let's go to the main hall. The last couple of times I've been here at Union Station were to ride Metra, so to be here knowing that I'm about to board an Amtrak train to a place I've never been to before, it's exhilarating. Now the city of New Orleans leaves at 8:05. Right now it's about 7:15, so I have 50 minutes before the train leaves, which is a good amount of time to be here in Chicago. Because it's an Amtrak train, we can't just go to the platforms. We have to go to the Amtrak boarding gates, which are right that way, so follow me. It's so busy here. Amtrak trains get really crowded during the summer months. I only started riding Amtrak a little bit before the pandemic began, so I think this is the first time I'm at a Union Station that's this packed, although I have seen it pretty busy before. But it's kind of fun to share the start of a journey with so many people. If you don't like traveling with a lot of people, I do recommend you opt for Amtrak travel in the spring or the fall.
A little before 8 o'clock, we were called to line up and board. I was secretly hoping for something, and once I reached the platform, I saw that what I was hoping for came true. Our locomotive was one of the brand new Siemens ALC-42 Chargers. This unit, number 304, is in the Special Edition Phase 6 livery. It's my first time riding on a train hauled by one of these. Now, in all my other Amtrak travels, they've always just let everyone sit where they want. But this time, the conductors handed out handwritten seat reservations that we had to comply with, because of how crowded it was. No problem for me, I wasn't going to spend much time in my seat anyway. The city of New Orleans, as well as the Illini and the Saluki, use the famous Superliner cars. The majority of the seats on these cars are on the top floor. Speaking of seats, I've reached mine, so let's check it out. The padding, width, and recline of these are phenomenal. I've spent many nights in a coach seat, and really, it's got all you need. There's a reading light, a footrest, though being 6 foot, I actually prefer resting my feet on the floor rather than the footrest. Your seat reclines with this lever, and there are 2 power outlets as well. Finally, these curtains block out the sun. And we're off! On superliners, Amtrak usually has the seats facing forwards. The direction of these seats reminds us that right now, we're actually backing out of Union Station. Here's the conductor monitoring the track and communicating with the engineers. Now we're crossing the Chicago River over the old Pennsylvania Railroad Bridge. This is the stop as they switch the tracks to get us onto Canadian National tracks. The locomotive is up front now, and we're traveling in the right direction down to Champaign-Urbana, Memphis, Jackson, and New Orleans. Underneath the McCormick place, our tracks align with the Metro Electric District, which we will follow until its final destination of University Park. Along the way, there will be 1 transfer station to Metro, Homewood, Illinois. The advantage of riding the city of New Orleans over the Illini or the Saluki is that there is a Sightseer Lounge. Granted, it's dark the entirety of Illinois, but still, this is my absolute favorite spot on an Amtrak train to sit. Riding on the city of New Orleans, Amtrak, Thursday evening rail, 7 cars and several hundred restless riders, 1 conductor, 0 sacks of mail. All along the southbound Odyssey, the train pulls out of Kankakee, rolls along past houses, farms, and fields. Getting off at Champaign, that's about all the lyrics that we could go through today. But what could have been a stressful 3-hour drive was now a relaxing evening train ride. And now you know why the Amtrak City of New Orleans, Illini, and Saluki leave Chicago running backwards. Now you'll certainly have a few more years to see this for yourself, but if you ever find yourself riding on one of these trains, make sure to pay attention, because it really is a remarkable move. Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Trains Are Awesome, follow us on Instagram, and consider supporting us on Patreon. We'll see you next time.